Hi, my name is Kim Brennan. I am doing just a short little video about my experience at Provo Canyon School. Um, I attended Provo '04 through '06. I got out 5 days shy of my 18th birthday. So yeah, I was just there shy of a couple years. So I'm going to kind of do this in two segments. First being kind of what I witnessed, things that I saw. And then second, being what I personally experienced during my stay there. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen and share my experience with me. And yeah, we'll get right into it. While I was there, I noticed varying things with other students. Anything from over medication, misuse of medication, down to, even the PRNs or everyday prescribed medications. It was basically to make us as docile as possible. And I noticed that with quite a few students, and their health suffered from it, whether it be weight gain, weight loss, other things of that nature, and those were never really addressed. It was more about keeping them complacent. So, and with that, I also witnessed a few times when they had what was called a Dial 9, which usually would result in a student getting tackled or restrained, either up against the wall or down on the ground. And I've seen multiple times where people have, just huge rug burns or abrasions from whether the wall or furniture that, wasn't really accounted for. And so I, witnessed a lot of that, and not only that, but they wouldn't really tend to, those afflicted wounds as well as accidental ones. So I saw that quite often, where people would just have scrapes and bruises nonstop. And I've been to another school where they did use restraints, and I've never seen anything like that there. So it's more about the method. And so with that, just general things of that nature, but anything also down to removing all personal items, not having your own clothing, not having your own amenities, anything of that nature, not really up on the nutrition was kind of questionable. It goes from the extreme down to the bare minimum. There are so many examples that one can give. And with that also I noticed, which will kind of tie into me in the next bit, staff and student dating was pretty rampant. I noticed probably about 4 individuals, I think maybe 2 to 1 staff and then individual to others, but there was between male and female staff and students, varying in ages, and and that would go on quite consistently. That was between them and the individual. So usually when they were alone, no one can account for what actually happened amongst them. But it was noted that it was sexual activity. That was pretty common knowledge amongst the units. And I remember one of the staff was confronted at work one day. His name was Tim. I can't remember his last name, but he was confronted at work one day and he ran off, and he literally hopped in his car and took off. And he was one of the ones dating individual students. So I remember witnessing that. So that's just a little taste of some of the things I saw. And so now I'll go directly to me. And so generally in this video, I'm going to respect the students and the survivors that I kind of went through stuff with, and also respecting the laws of HIPAA. So I won't be mentioning any student names, but the staff are not protected by HIPAA. And in some cases, they've had their opportunity to give their side of the story and rejected to do so. So I will continue with mine. Basically, while I was there, I immediately pretty much ended up on investment. I think I was there 2 weeks before I ended up on the investment unit, which is kind of the strict unit, or, trouble unit, or what have you. And with that, I had my own kind of emotional kind of situation going on, hence being at that school to begin with. And so there was, self-harm and things like that. And so it ended up in this kind of never-ending sentence on investment through pretty much my entire stay. And with that translated to, countless observation room visits. That's the concrete room with the slab floor. Because it's on investment, it's right there, it's so accessible. I think that was part of the problem. So, at times I would spend days. I think the longest I spent was probably close to 3 weeks in there. Everything from not having my own clothes to not being able to go to the bathroom, not being offered water. They would often forget to bring a separate meal up to the unit for me. I would be in a predicament where if I asked for help, they would ignore me. If I said anything, they just would ignore me, and I would kind of be left to my own devices in there. I even often took to noting where the sun was so I can actually know what time it was. So they would put me in there, and often, if, I wasn't agreeing with that option, it would turn into a very minor scuffle. And in which case I would receive Halidol. And while I was there, I received Halidol, I think it was 5 or 6 times. My parents only knew about one time and were not happy with that one time, but they were never called again. People have crazy adverse reactions to Halidol. It affects your nervous system and your spinal cord. And if you have adverse reactions, it creates movements in your body that are beyond unnatural, painful. For weeks, your muscles recover, and often you bite your own tongue. I mean, it's very interesting how impacted the physical body can be from that medication. They knew that. I was seizing kind of once in the observation room, and they didn't call any kind of medical services or anything of that nature. I think they threw me a sweatshirt from what I remember. But after, a certain point, a staff member who seemed to be rather strict finally decided to say, hey, she needs Cogentin. And Cogentin will counteract the adverse effects of Halidol. But the nurses, when we confronted them on that information, saying, why haven't you been pairing these two anytime she's dosed, they said basically, well, she didn't ask for it. Like a 16-year-old is supposed to know about the scientific background of particular pill interactions. So that was, in my eyes, a sense of neglect and improper medical care. For the tail end of my stay, it was about 5 or 6 times that they injected me with that. And I had adverse reactions every single time. And even still to this day, I still have some muscle tics, which is quite common. But that was my experience. So, and that's just, kind of on that end of it. But on a separate end, also, while I was on investment, there was a staff member working that unit. I believe at the time she went back and forth between orientation and investment. And her name at the time was Emma Norton. She is since divorced and remarried, and now is Emma Robinson, something of that nature. And I didn't really, I didn't really have the greatest mindset when I was at Provo. I'm 32 now, so I've done a lot of work, but it's hard to admit. And so when I had all these other things going on, injections, issues in school, emotional problems, it just dealing and speaking with her directly was a good distraction. And slowly but surely it evolved into her just approaching me on more of a physical level. And then eventually we were what would be considered to be in a relationship, physically, emotionally. Now that I'm 32 and I'm older than she was at the time, it's revolting. It's revolting. And I've had to do some internal processing on that, and it's taken a long time. But I was 16 and she would have been 26, 27, 28, somewhere in there. Um, and so I've passed that age, and I could not imagine dating somebody in high school. It's revolting. So um, that's kind of where I fit in that situation also. Some other videos have mentioned that happening, and as far as I'm aware, I don't know of anybody else coming forward and, speaking out on it. But yeah, also with that, for me individually, so Emma Norton, her mother-in-law, Miss Norton, in the school department, was in on the loop. She knew something was going on, and immediately my education went downhill. I wasn't able to attend school. I wasn't able to do assignments or projects that required working with other people. And overnight, she immediately tried to, pretty much dissolve my high school career. Not that there was much of one, but, once she realized it mattered to me also, that my education mattered, then she was a hindrance from that day on. And that was at least over a year and a half of my high school education. So, it's interesting how it all kind of comes together. So, yeah, I will check out, I don't know if I'll get any comments or anything, but I will try to answer any questions if I do. And again, I just appreciate you taking the time to hear my story and hear my side of it. And, yeah, everybody stay safe out there, and see you next time.